friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa String Works workshop. This will be part 4 of building the custom mandolin. We'll, in this video, show you how we got it up to this stage. The back is not attached yet. The top is attached to the sides. You can see there's kerfing in the sides. And the back is carved on the outside, but the inside is still flat. So that'll just give you an idea of what's coming in the video today. Other thing I wanted to mention is I have this. What is this? Well, it's not much. It's a pickup. It's got the 2 pots with it, and I guess a condenser here. I'm not sure. A resistor probably. I'm not sure what that is. I am not a electronics expert on instruments. It is a Kent pickup. It says WC18. WC18. And it's been laying around in the shop for, I'm sure, years, collecting dust. I was cleaning up some things in the shop yesterday. I noticed this was laying in here. And here's the deal. If you want it, it's yours. First come, first serve. Send me an email. Don't do it in the comments. Send me an email, okay, if you want this. So the first email I receive, you'll get this free of charge. The only thing is I'm going to charge you $4.50 to ship it. So if you want this, I don't know what it was used on. It's been laying around forever. Otherwise, it's going in the trash. So it's a Kent WC18 with 2 pots and a resistor, and it's very old, and you can see the condition. It's not in the best perfect condition or anything. These little arms here are bent a little bit, but I'm sure they could be straightened. So that's the condition it's in. The 2 little pointers are still here. That the knobs are gone. I don't have any knobs for it. But anyway, if that's something that's of interest to you, it's yours for free. Just send me an email. So let's get into part 4 of building this custom mandolin. Off camera, I just spent about 40 minutes, maybe 45 minutes. I don't know. I didn't really keep track. Carving some more wood off the back of this mandolin. If you don't think it's hard to push, look at those fingers. It definitely puts the marks in your fingers. This is really hot. It's hard to explain. I don't know. It's not so hot you can't hold on to it, but it's pretty hot. And you can see we put a pretty good dent in it. You can still see the little raised edge around there where I routed it. And I'm starting now to work on this thicker part up here. But anyway, I'm going to take a break for a while because that is really hard on your fingers. That's about all I dare cut out with a chisel. Maybe a little more I could do, but the problem with the chisel is it can chip out a great big hunk. So, it's better to play it safe than to take the risk of knocking out a big extra hunk. So now we go back to the little plane and clean it all up. Yeah, that's looking pretty good now. Starting to look like a scroll, rough, very rough scroll, but it's starting to get there. Been doing a lot of carving on the back off camera, and I'm about, I don't know, I'm going to say 90% done with the outside. Haven't started on the inside yet, but that gives me an opportunity to address a question that came up, I believe, in the first video where I was carving the top. One of the comments was, you're doing it wrong. You should be carving the inside first. That way, your back would be laying flat on the table and you can carve the inside, and then you turn it over and you're still laying flat on that rim and you carve the outside. Well, that statement is basically true, and it is another way to do it. If I were doing it by machine, I absolutely would do it that way. Absolutely, I wouldn't even consider doing it the way I'm doing it. But doing it by hand, I feel it's very important to get the outside shape the way I want it first. And, I'm doing them all by hand, so every one of them is that much different. They're all just a little different. Every one of them's not exactly the same. They're really close because I do a lot of things to make them really close by hand, but they're not perfectly the same. So what I want to do is make sure I'm happy with the outside first, then I carve the inside, and that way I can check the measurements to the outside and make sure I'm the right thickness everywhere. And the comment about the fact that it's flat or not flat, it doesn't really matter at all when you're doing it by hand, because you're holding it and you're doing this, and actually to some degree it's kind of an advantage. You can rock it and turn it the way you want to, and it's not a problem. Trust me, it's not a problem. When you're doing it by hand, for me, I would say you'd have a tough time talking me into carving the inside first, doing it by hand, versus doing the outside. It makes much more sense to me when you're doing it by hand to carve the outside first, to get the outside exactly the way you want it. Then you just go ahead and you carve that inside, and you check your thicknesses everywhere to the outside shape that you want. And anyway, so that's the way I do it, and that's why I do it that way. Just hopefully that'll clear up that question or whatever. Anyway, I'm really close. I'm still feeling it around just by hand, and I've got a lot of things to do to it yet. When I check the thickness here, I can see a fairly big flat spot in this area yet. A fairly wide flat spot about so big and about so big. So we've got to work, tapering that all down to that shape. It's good, but it's just a little chunky still. So I've got my leveling tooth plane here now, and that's what I'm working with for the most part. I may have to go back to the other plane or blade for a little while to take some more meat off of it. But the tooth blade will take some meat off too if you know what you're doing and you work at it. It is. This back is much, much harder on your fingers though. I mean, they're really tender. So I'm only carving 3 or 4 hours a day on it at this point. It would really be tough to do this detail without this tooth blade. This wood catches the blade almost any direction you're going, and even with the tooth blade you have to change directions sometimes. Another thing I like to do is smooth all this area out with a half round file, and it's easier to do it obviously before you would attach it to the sides. And so anyway, just taking that opportunity to do that right now before I would forget or something. We'll call that good for right now. In these curved places like this, I'm using my tool that I use to scrape the finish off underneath the bridge, which is just a planer blade, one of these rounded planer blades in my handle here. It works great for going cross grain and getting down in here and getting this smooth, because this is really hard area to work on because of the hard wood too. That gets it real nice and close. The way I detail this round thing is I try to make it as round as I can get it. So you can see how I cut past it up here and cut around it right here with the X-Acto knife, and then I clean that all out, which gives the illusion that the circle keeps going. And then I also bevel it around here so far so that when we're done we have a fairly round circle. It's not perfect, but it's pretty round, and that kind of gives you an idea there. And you know what I also sometimes do is, like, I'll cut off a little bit of it here where it's sticking out a little bit more, where it's not real round, to make it more round or appear more round. Just checking it all over to make sure that it feels good. I think it's still a little heavy in places. Got it pretty round now. There's very little flat area at all. Hello friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa Stringworks Workshop. This will just be a little short clip that we'll put in somewhere on some video someday. Tom from Gardenia, California sent me this very ornate, stylish Mandolin bridge. It's a solid piece, and you can see how it's curved. It's got angles going every direction, you know, it's just different. And the problem is that this little piece on the top is an add-on, but it's been chipped and it's broken right in here. I don't know if the camera is going to focus on that or not. Maybe I'm too close, but right there on this side you can see how it's chipped off. I mean, you know, it would be nice to replace the whole thing, but actually, I thought it was funny because his note says, I don't think this will turn into one of your nightmare projects. Well, I was expecting something different when he said he was sending this to me. I was expecting a little slide-in piece that would slide down inside the bridge, and it would just be a replacement, kind of like a guitar saddle. You slide it into a slot. And I was expecting that because I've seen that many times. But this has just been a little piece that's just glued flat on the top of here. Well, if I break all the rest of that off of there, I won't know where the slots are, how deep they are, etc. So, and then it would become a nightmare project. So what I think I'm gonna do, and I don't know if he's gonna be happy with this, but I'm going to just take a razor saw and saw a very fine slot across the thickest part right here that's still good. Add on to that. So there'll be a tiny little seam there, but I don't even think you'll hardly see it once I get it done, and I'll try to make it fit perfect, you know. And then we'll just shape the last little piece here that's broken back to what it's supposed to be and put the grooves back in it. One thing I'm going to do, I got to make myself some reference. So I'm going to, this is like the end of the bridge, and the end of the bridge here is a reference. And then I'm going to draw across here, and then I'm going to draw where the individual strings are for the spacing. Anyway, that's about as close as I'm going to get to it, so that when I put this new piece on here, I'll know where to cut the new grooves. Now I'm going to take a razor saw, and I may have to put this in a vise, but I'm going to try to split the biggest part here that's solid, and saw right across. Yeah, I just barely want to go through it. I don't really want to get into the other piece. I think we did that. Now I'm going to take a X-Acto knife and cut off the bad part here.
And I did that. That was easy. And now I'll take that same X-Acto knife, use it as a scraper, and scrape this whole area good and flat, which is pretty good already. And now we'll cut us a little piece of ebony that we can glue on here and then start to reshape it. This is why I save all these precious scraps of exotic woods. This is, anybody else probably just would have thrown that away, but you know what? It's just about the perfect size to cut a piece out and work with this. So I'm just going to start right about in here. It's catching. I'm going to see if the wax will make it work better. Sometimes wax will make it slide and cut better. Okay, now I'm just curious, well, this piece I cut off, it might even be big enough. Kind of think it is, but not sure. I'll start with that and see if it works. If not, I'll use this bigger piece, which was where I was going anyway, but, if we can use this piece that's cut off, we might as well do it. I want to get it good and flat on the bottom. I believe that's going to be big enough. The end on this is not very good, so I need to file the end more flat. I'll come over here to this vise to file the end flat. It's pretty good. I'm going to take a smaller, finer cut file and file it a little bit better. And let's see if that will meet up with the bridge here without making a... Wow, that looks good and tight. That's just by accident, but it looks really tight. I don't see a gap in that at all. And now what I think I'll do is just mark it and cut off to length. And I'll leave it a little long. Yeah, I cut off real nice, real nice. Alright, that looks pretty good. I'm actually pretty happy with the way that looks. It looks good and tight all the way around. So we're going to get our good super glue, put it on here, and let that set up for a little while. There's just a tiny little bit of a area that's not flat right here on the end. What we're going to do, as carefully as possible, is just get a little bit of super glue on this. Try not to get too much. It's very easy to get too much really fast. And it always has to go around and make a mess if it can make a mess, and it usually can. After it's been setting a while like this, I take and use the accelerator. It just cures it. It doesn't make that instant cure like it would if you put it on there fresh. But if you let it set a little while, then it doesn't foam up. And I think it makes a stronger bond too. But it does get it drying, where you don't have to sit and wait another 15 minutes for it to really dry. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that so far. It just continues to go the right way here. That's what it looks like right now. We just have a big clunky piece of wood on there. So we've got that would be the A strings, the D strings, the G strings. So this is where the E's go. And just giving that a few more seconds here to set up a little bit better. And then what we're going to do is, with detailed files, we're going to try to file this off and make it look like it never happened. And now we've got a little more challenge here. I've got to smooth it off front and back. Not sure if this chisel will be sharp enough or not to cut this ebony. It's pretty sharp. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Not bad at all. Now maybe with the files I can clean it up a little bit more. It's still just a hair long. If I could, this X-Acto knife is pretty sharp. See if I can cut it off just a little bit on the length. It's just not quite what I'm looking for. Yeah, it works so perfect you cannot even see the seam. It's perfect. I'll show it to you up close here in a little bit, but I'm going to still work on this back here. Got a little pocket to file in this. Yeah, you can't see a seam at all. Actually, my part's a little smoother than the original. I'll smooth out the original too, or you can't really even see it. Okay, here's how, I don't know how close you can see it with the camera, but we cut it right across here, and there's no seam there now. You don't even see a seam. So we added on this much material here. Now you can see the seam here, but you can also see it across here. So that looks just like one continuous seam, same way on the back. So it's just about as close to perfect as you can get for a replacement there. Now we'll just mark where the strings go and put the little grooves back in. Well, that's about as good as anything like that can be done, in my opinion. I'm not bragging, just don't think you could do it much better, because it looks to me like it's back to original condition and cannot see a seam or anything. So to me, it's just about perfect. To get rid of those scratches right there, take this scraper and clean that up. I'm not sure if I did those or if those were there already, but should be able to clean it up with this. There, I think that's got it. Yep, that's nice and slick and smooth. I can't see how he could complain about that job. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. The sides for this mandolin have been sitting for several days, actually. And I took them out of the mold a little while ago, and I cleaned them up just a little bit just to make sure that it was what I thought and that were glued well and all that kind of thing. And I went ahead and put them back in the mold and spread them back out a little bit. And I've got a piece of kerfing here. I'll put a link in the description on how I make this kerfing if you're interested. And so that'll show you how I make it. I've already kind of pre-bent this and tried to fit it up here. I've tapered the end of this so it'll fit up in this tight crack here. And so what we're going to do is go ahead and glue it up and start putting her together. I'm just fitting it in here. I'm going to fit it with, and then I tighten it with clothespins. I'm actually fitting it just a hair below the surface of these sides because these sides are kind of thick, a little bit extra oversized. We're going to put them through the thickness sander and cut them back down yet. But anyway, so get that good and tight, and then start working it around this curve this way. Just do it slowly and hopefully it won't break the kerfing. Not that it really makes much difference if it does break it. Okay, so now the rest of this isn't glued, and I just wanted to do that so I would know where to break it off and put it in there. And now I'll glue the rest of this and we'll put her in place. One thing you gotta, you have to take this inside part of the mold out before you can do the other side, but that won't be a problem. I prefer to leave it in there while I'm doing this. It kind of helps hold the sides to their actual shape on the first side. Then the other side will take care of itself. I'll point out one difference if you do click on the link for the other kerfing. The other kerfing I cut square. I do it both ways. And what happens if I cut it square and put it in here square, then I just take my Dremel tool with the sander and sand it off to the angle I want. Works perfectly good, and it's really fast that way too. So I used to do it that way, but I found it just as easy to go ahead and cut it in the triangle ahead of time. It really doesn't make much difference. There's always more than one way to skin a cat, like I say. But this kerfing is already triangled here. So if you do look at the video, though, you'll see that I cut that other kerfing square. Exactly the same process, though. And if you're wondering what the purpose of the kerfing is, that gives you something to glue the top to. When you cut the binding in there, you're cutting all that away. So it's just a support for the top and the binding, basically, is what it amounts to. Okay, that's very nice. We'll have to give that a couple hours to set up good, and then we will move it. We'll take the inside out of here, we'll push it through, and we'll do the other side. Now that the kerfing is installed on the sides, or at least on the top side there, I will work on cleaning up this area here, because it won't be very long. We'll be attaching this to the body. I like to work on these areas quite a bit because, you know, then you can match it up to the sides and see, does it look like it lines up good, and then you can work on it some more. But once you get it glued to it, it's much harder to work on this. So this is the time to work on it. And like I said, all I'm doing right now is just smoothing it out, cleaning it up. I haven't tried to fit it to the sides yet. There may be quite a bit more work required. Might even have to take a bandsaw to it in places. We won't know that till though I try to do a real fit up. I pre-wet this a little bit just to make it bend a little bit better. And now we'll go ahead and fit her in here. I'm pulling out on it a little bit. It wants to pull in, and just pulling out on it a little bit as I glue this helps hold it out to the outside of the frame a little better. We'll give that a few hours to set up and move on to the next step. I'm going to use the thickness sander here to sand these sides smooth and level. Taking very, very light pass the first time or two through. Really makes a nice flat set of sides, and I'm going to check my thickness now. I think I'm still probably a hair wide, but we're going to check that real close and we'll see where we need to go. As I figured, I'm still a little bit thick, so we're going to run through here a little bit more. We've still got a little bit to take off right here anyway, so that'll work out just fine. I think we're going to call that real good right there. That's pretty darn close to the measurements that I got off of the lower, and that should make a real nice set of sides. You can see it's very tight there on the fit and everything. It's really nice looking set of sides. Lining up everything here, getting ready to glue the top onto the sides. I want to check this area out really well so that I can get that lined up real good. And it appears to me that we need to knock out a little bit right in this area here of the block. So the block needs to come out a little bit right in here. And I'm going to try to do that with a file. I may have to go to a saw here and knock that out. I think I'm going to have to go to the saw because it's quite a bit, and try to pencil in here about where I think it needs to go to. I'm just about ready to glue the sides to the top, and I've spent over an hour just cleaning this area up here, trying to make it good and open so that if we need, put a strap in there later, it'll fit in there and everything. And just trying to make it decent, because it's really hard to do much with that after you get the sides glued on here. And it looks pretty good. I won't sit here and tell you it's perfect, but it's pretty good. So I think we're about ready to put this together. And that's always a little bit of a challenge, to get it just to fit exactly right. My tops are always fitting where the sides are just barely sticking out past the top, and that's what I'm trying to do all the way around. That's a little bit less routing for the binding too, so it's not a bad thing. Well, there you go. She's all clamped up. Couldn't come loose now if it wanted to. There's a little bit of squeeze out inside there, and it would be a good time to just wipe that out. I'll get a damp rag and do that. That's what she looks like on the inside. And there she goes. She's all clamped up. She is ready to set for, I'm just going to let it set overnight. No point in brushing anything. This is all set up overnight, so let's take it apart and see what we ended up with. Well, there's the inside of it, and there's the outside of it. It looks lined up real well all the way around. It vibrates real nice. You can hear it vibrating, and it just continues to vibrate after you tap it. Everything inside looks good as far as the way everything's lined up. This is if you're building your own mandolin for the first time, this is one of the more exciting times, because you can kind of put the front and back together and start to see what the mandolin's going to look like. And now that I have it together, I'm going to go ahead and measure the thickness here, the total thickness, and see where I'm at on the total thickness, because I have a number in my head that I want to kind of match there, and I want to see if I'm close to that before I start carving any more of the back. On the lower mandolin, I had taken an overall body thickness at the center height here, and let me just tell you, surprise, surprise, if you measure everything accurately, I'm within 0.04 of an inch from here to here of being exactly like the lower. Now, and that's to the best that I can measure it. Actually, sometimes it measures within 0.03 of an inch, and it's difficult to measure something like this to get it perfect. So that's less than a human hair width from here to here. So I'm going to call that close enough. Pretty happy with that. Pretty happy with that. So that means that the air chamber inside ought to be pretty darn close to the air chamber of that lower that I took apart back in the 90s. We can't glue the back on here yet. Well, I guess we could, but I wouldn't. It wouldn't be the proper procedure for me. What we'll do next is we'll make the neck, and we'll get the neck as close as we can to what we want. And then we'll cut the joint in here and fit the neck to the body and make sure that the neck is at the right angle to this top. Once we get the neck fitted to the top and sides, then we can put the back on. So we're not too far away from having a completed body anyway, completed a mandolin. Then all the work starts, when you have to do all the pretty stuff. That's when it really does start. I'm not kidding. Oh, well, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I haven't carved the inside of the back yet.